Welcome to the Growth Whisperers, where everything that we talk about is about building great, enduring teams. I'm Brad Giles, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Kevin Lawrence. Welcome, Kevin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Brad. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good indeed. Pretty good indeed. Looking forward to an interesting conversation. So what do we got
Me as
on
well.
today?
Yeah, well, today we're going to always looking at kind of innovative thoughts. And today we've got interesting thought from Elon Musk on really what a business is. And no, it's not something that goes to Mars. It's actually about what the business is. It's just some interesting thoughts that he prompted. And then really looking at the effectiveness and the efficiency of all these virtual meetings that we're doing. And I think it's awesome that we're doing all these virtual meetings, and there's some really benefits and time saving and cost saving. But are we really saving? And that's kind of the question that we're going to explore today. And I think we have some different views on it. But and time will tell. But we're going to dig into that today. I think it's going to be
a good chat.
It'll be really interesting. Really interesting.
Yeah. All right, so let's begin. So we both saw Elon Musk chatting with Joe Rogan today or in the last few days.
Yep.
Interesting fellow, an interesting conversation. And there was a couple of really key statements around business. He's one of our most successful, the most successful business people of our age, okay? One of those was business is only the organization of resources. That's a fascinating way to look at it. It strips everything down to business is just the organization of resources. That's what you do. You can do it really well or you can do it really poorly.
Yep.
What did you think, Kevin, when you heard that?
I was out for a walk this morning, and my son Braden told me about that Musk. We listened to the Musk interview with Joe Rogan 2 weeks ago. We were going on a long drive, and he told me there was another one, and I'm walking, listening to it. I stopped and I made notes, and I'm like, I just love it when someone boils down the essence of what something is. And business looks like this big, crazy, complicated thing, but it was like the organization of resources. And then he went on to say, and if you do it well, you get the ability to allocate more capital into those organized resources. And I thought, man, if you put it like in a military context, military leaders organize resources. And in a business context, the best leaders, the CEOs we work with, leaders we work with, are organizing resources. And that's why being organized is a big part of what makes us or breaks us. I remember I have a client I worked with. His name was Harry. Great guy. I worked with him going back 20 years ago. And I said, Kevin, we just need 7 points on a page. Like we always needed 7 points on a page. Yeah. And 7 points on the page was the plan. It was organizing the resources. And that was his version of got to be organized. You got to have your 7 points of what you got to do, and then you're good to go.
And but if you don't do it well, you suffer.
But you do. It's like in anything. If you look at, success goes to, or luck goes to the prepared generally.
Yeah.
And I just really loved it because it makes me think a lot about what the most successful people we work with do. And I think of, one of the CEOs I worked with in the Middle East, he was organized. His people were organized. People feared his assistant because she was organized. And if you said you were going to do something and you didn't, I remember I had a driver there that would pick me up and take me to the meetings because that's what happens in that culture. Yeah. And I remember I would get in the car and instantly the CEO's assistant would call to make sure he had got me on time. And I could tell he was talking to her because he always looked nervous. But they were so organized and the business ran like a Swiss watch.
Yeah.
And in emerging markets, that's not always the case. So yeah, the organization of resources, it's just so simple. And I look at, and that's why sometimes, org structures are actually really important.
Oh yeah.
Because it's the way you organize. And when you get companies that get bigger and then you get cross-functional teams, it gets messy. Yeah. Because it comes down to organization. Who's in charge? Who's not in charge? Who's doing this? So it's
a great way to it's a great way to simplify it down to something that it makes sense on so many levels. Number one, but number two, today, and today we're going to be talking a bit about Zoom meetings and what's good and what we've seen that isn't so good, and the effectiveness around that. But if you can't organize your resources well in this COVID environment with Zoom meetings and make them effective and efficient, there's a price to pay. I've seen some great examples of that. But I want to tell you, that was something that was striking for both of us, something that really stood out to me. He spoke about how many people study law and how many people study finance. and he said it's way too many. More people should make things.
Yes. Now, to be clear,
it's not.
I love my friends and lawyers that I work with, and the finance people and the corporate finance people. We love you. Don't worry, you're great.
Yep.
But he's just saying, and he went on. Sorry, I cut you off there, Brad. But the way he looked at it is it's great because they are, from an organizing perspective, they're brilliant, but they don't do the real work. In his opinion, he said more people need to do the real work, which was a little bit controversial. And he went on even to talk about manufacturing and how that manufacturing used to kind of, not be seen as a sexy thing or a great thing. Those are my words, not his. But manufacturing is the real work. And all of a sudden, people are really interested in manufacturing back in their home country again. Yeah.
But that's where the joy in life comes from. And I think that my
manufacturing?
Take on it,
manufacturing?
Yeah, making things.
Oh, okay, got it.
Making things, mastering something. That's where a great deal of joy comes from. If you're in finance or law, nothing against those things. And let's be fair, some people build great businesses in finance or law. But in terms of what should you study, when people are falling, he said that such a high percentage of people are falling into these areas to study.
Yep.
That it doesn't necessarily lead you to be able to master and to make something and to become truly great at it. I love the word mastery, because I think about a Japanese sword maker who masters something and he's learnt it his whole life and becomes great at it. Now, as an analog or as a metaphor for what we talk about in businesses, we can find many ways. I certainly try to master what I do, and I think it's my observation that you do as well. But think about a career is what I took out of it, where you're going to be making something, where you're going to be building something. And he was talking to Joe Rogan about his podcast as making something, but yeah, I think it's great. People, entrepreneurs are the people who make the world keep turning. Entrepreneurs are the ones that make such a big difference. And I don't know. I think that
they're building a better mousetrap. At the end of the day, they're finding a way to use mustard to better organize resources, but they're finding a better solution to something.
Yeah.
And it is exciting. And that's why, working with entrepreneurs all day, every day, and I love it. There's this creativity and this adaptability and this persistence and resilience and creativity, all of these things, almost majority of my people I spend the most time with and my friends are entrepreneurs because they're fun and creative and interesting. And they're willing to take risks and make things happen and take accountability. There's all kinds of great things about it.
And that speaks to human nature. Like if there was no money and we didn't have a need for stability financially,
sure,
people would naturally end up trying to do those kind of creative things that you're talking about.
That's true. Like I've got this thing where I really want to design a house.
Right.
And that's that making something, right?
Yeah.
And some people, for the lawyers, it might be making the perfect legal document or perfect agreement, right? But there's this, and we do organizing, and our business is organizing people and organizing meetings, but there's something that comes from that physical satisfaction of building something and seeing something show up in front of your own eyes. And
you can't beat it.
I love it. I do. And it's almost closer to a spiritual experience where you're connecting with something more than just this intellectual experience. Because we're creating value and creating things intellectually, but when I get a chance to do it physically, and it's been wild over these last 4 weeks, like I've been cooking a lot more.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. And just, you know, and for the vegans that are listening, I apologize. But I have a friend and I, you know, who is a real carnivore, and he's a hunter. But he found this thing where you can dry age your own beef.
Okay.
So do you know what dry aging is? The difference between dry aging and regular aging of
I know quite a lot about that, actually.
okay. So if you
Not,
know,
no,
for those of you that don't
not
know,
in the context of me and all of the people in this room with me, I know a lot about it, but not in terms of the broader population. I know a bit about it.
okay, good. Well, I know a bit about it too. But
Yeah.
basically, you know, in modern manufactured food, the way beef was made in the past, and probably be similar with other meats, I just know beef. And we had a client that we worked with, this place called Two Rivers Meats in outside of Vancouver that does very, very high-end meats and excellent meat. But you would dry age it so that the meat would hang, and naturally the oxygen would oxygenate a bit, which adds some more flavor.
Yeah.
So the moisture would drip out, but the meat would naturally hang and stretch and naturally tenderize for 30, 45, 60 days. And I'm thinking this because I had one of the steaks that we did this with. So I learned a lot about it, but to mass process food and to make it cost effective, you can't do it because it takes a lot of space and a lot of time. So now what happens for normal meat is that they process it and they put it into a bag, and it's called wet aging. It sits in a bag and it's still tasty as heck, but it ain't like dry age. Dry age is generally more tender, more flavorful, and it weighs less because a lot of the moisture drops. So it's more expensive. So point of it being, my friend found these bags that you can dry age in your own fridge. So I said, hey, get me a chunk of meat. So it was ready about a month ago. And shout out to Nino. Nino's a master of this stuff. And so we go to his place, and then we're out there and we get this big cutting board, this big knife, and this big chunk of beef, and we're cutting it up into steaks. Now it's got bone in it, so you got to cut around. Like, it sounds crazy, but it was this experience of trying to cut the ideal steaks out of this meat that we almost made ourselves. Like, we didn't grow the cow, but you know, we dry aged it ourselves, or he did. And I mean, they tasted amazing because it was almost like artisan homemade steaks.
Yeah.
But there was this experience of doing that. Now it takes way more time. It's completely inefficient time-wise.
Yeah.
But the experience of it, it was like, I'm excited talking about chopping up a piece of meat. And of course, when I cooked it today, it tasted excellent. Now, is that psychological? Or is it actually that much better? But it's that hands-on, involved in things that you know, it's almost like it's coming back because of some of the things that are going on. I'm getting that experience, as I mentioned, with cooking, and I think that's a bit of this thing about being involved in making of stuff where there's a different type of intrinsic reward.
Well, you know, it's building new neural pathways. It's improving the neuroplasticity of the brain and enabling us to. Yeah, there is something that is about from a human perspective, making your own food. Absolutely, I agree. So I developed a hobby of smoking meats a few years ago. Yeah, so I bought what's called a Traeger, an offset smoker, and I cooked briskets and pizzas and ribs and a whole range of things. Nonetheless, I got into that. And around neuroplasticity. Now, only someone like me would say that, of course. But to maintain mental or brain health, because if you don't learn new things, your brain just rots away. So in order to do that, I wanted to learn things like cooking, like you said, for the enjoyment, absolutely, but to maintain brain health. And funnily enough, in the last week, I started guitar as well. Bought an app to learn guitar to improve brain health for the enjoyment as well. But there's something inherently in the ability to master.
That's probably why I've always got a new subject I'm learning about.
Yeah,
because it keeps me fresh and keeps new ideas and neural pathways that I scientifically, I'm not a scientist, but it makes a lot of sense. And if I think about it, I love to learn new things. I do. And for me, I get a point of mastery. It's like, okay, good. I've got lots of good stuff. And then I feel like I need to stretch myself some more. Maybe it's my brain wanting to be stretched and to continue. And all those things, as you know, come in handy. Because when you understand the mechanics, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that okay, let's just exclude COVID because that's been a crazy time. Do you think that the last year before COVID went fast or slow?
Like super fast.
You're not learning enough. If it feels like it's going, maybe I've got that wrong, but if it feels like it's going at a speed, right, then you're not learning enough. When you're a kid, the same amount of time, it feels like it's dragging on. Like, geez, it was a long time ago since Christmas time if you were 8 years old.
Yeah, I hear you.
And it's because you're cutting more neural pathways when you're younger.
Now, is that true or is that something Brad just made up?
No, it's definitely true. It was a TED talk.
You're normally very factual, Brad, so I'm not doubting you. I'm just like, because I'm thinking, if I think about this year, it's May, and it seems like it's been forever. Now, is that recency bias because I'm looking like at the last few months? That's really interesting.
Yeah, really, no, there's definitely some science
learning kind of slows the experience of life down.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you let's say we get someone who's 70 and they're not learning anything new, right? They're not cutting new neural pathways. They're in the same habits as they were last year and the year before, and you know the newness of learning. Their years will be going past fast. It will feel to them. The more, if you can say to them, all right, well, we're going to learn Japanese and then we're going to learn how to, I don't know, cook this certain dish. The more neural pathways you can cut, the slower it will feel that life is progressing.
Interesting. I like it.
Well, This is definitely not where we planned for this talk to go. It
isn't, but it's fascinating. So we got a lesson on dry aging beef and how to improve your neural pathways. Telling you what, we got lots to offer here. That's awesome. So it's a couple things real quick, just before we move on. We were also talking about Musk, and one of the things he's a fascinating guy to listen to or watch.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is there's many things about him that are inspiring as a leader. And like right now, in the news, he is opening up his Tesla factory, or Tesla as he would call it. He's opening up his factory in California against county orders. And let me read his exact tweet that he put out. And if this isn't badass leadership, I don't know what is. So it says from his account, Tesla is restarting production today against Alameda County rules. I will be on the line with everyone else. If anyone is arrested, I ask that it only be me. Like, how is that for great leadership? He's taking a stand for something he believes, but he's on the front lines with the people doing the work, like he was talking about, and willing to take the hit personally. I think that's pretty cool.
So you're a person on the line. How are you going to feel about your CEO saying that? You are going to be. It's unlocking the pride in him, in the business, in the product. I mean, it's the right thing to do from the company perspective, from his own perspective. He's supporting the workers, all of that. And I don't want to get into the pros and cons and opening and not.
That's a whole other conversation.
Must be a safe environment, full stop. But
for sure.
In terms of leadership, that's exactly what. That's the right thing to do. Stand up and be a leader. And it only feels abnormal, or we're only talking about it because there's such an absence of it on such a regular occasion.
Yes, I've seen it. It's like so many. I was sharing with you earlier. There's another CEO that I saw of a major company in the US who was getting questioned about their employees not having close to what would be called a living wage. A single mother with a child not being able to support her child and going into debt every month. And when the CEO was asked questions and put on the spot about it, he goes, I'd have to think about that.
Yeah.
And she got pestered or he got pestered with about 7 or 8 questions, and every time, and it's like he had the balls of a squirrel. You know, he wasn't gonna stand up and I'd have to think about that now. And I understand, like, he's doing what he's supposed to do to protect the shareholders,
Yeah.
who pay him and hire him of that big monstrous company. And so from a shareholder value perspective and protecting their investment and protecting their business, of course, they're going to keep the wages as low as possible. And he's going to have almost a political answer to every question. Like, I understand he's doing his job.
Yeah.
But those are the kind of leaders that inspire me. Like, so he's doing his job on behalf of the shareholders. But when you see what Musk does, you're like, I don't know. I guess maybe I resonate more with some of those, entrepreneurial cowboy kind of guys and gals.
Yeah, but that's probably why you and I work in medium-sized business and not enterprise, because
yes,
the politics, a lot of the stuff that happens in enterprise business, I prefer someone who's going to be more authentic or do the right thing over.
It's where the purpose still matters, where the organization is still trying to be a mechanism for good, not just good shareholder return. And I am horrible in enterprise big companies. It's not my thing. Now, I can go and speak and do keynotes and talk to them. I'll talk about stuff around, oxygen mask stuff or other principles, no problem. But to work with them closely, I have a different value set, and I don't thrive or nor do my best work in those environments.
No, I mean, me neither.
Yeah. Well, let's switch gears.
Yeah.
So lots of interesting things, and inspired by great leadership. And I leave people with a thought of, what are you doing to be out on the front lines? What's your rallying cry? What are you taking a stand for? What are you doing locking arm on arm or arm in arm with your people, social distancing, of course, to really do what you believe is right in your heart? And as a last note, just the last tiny thought, we had a call the other night with a bunch of CEOs around the world for another program we do. And, one of the CEOs goes, is it okay if I don't just slash all the parts of one of my divisions that aren't doing well? And we had a conversation, asked some more questions. And the end of it was like, hey, man, if you're okay with investing a bit of extra capital in one of your parts of your businesses and not slashing it, it's your show. You do whatever the heck you feel right. Yeah. Popular wisdom, popular thinking would be to slash it and make it profitable for sure. But he just didn't feel like that was the right thing for him to do. And I'm like, well, then don't. But sometimes you need permission to still keep that entrepreneurial cowboy spirit and take the risks that you think are appropriate versus what conventional wisdom would tell you to do.
Yeah, the buck stops here. If you're prepared to back that decision, then that's great. Then that's
exactly.
That's
great. That's what founder CEOs have a different opportunity to do, because they can do what they feel is right. Yeah. Versus what's right in the financials, which some other CEOs, unfortunately, are stuck on a bit, which has pros and cons too. So, but let's go into the second thing we wanted to get into today, and it's like this. And we're kind of touching on it a bit, but this is this efficiency versus effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you and I have some different thoughts on it, which I think is awesome. But it's like having this not traveling, not commuting, all this stuff creates a lot of efficiency in the system. Like, we did a strat planning session yesterday for one of our clients, 24 of us on the Zoom call for 2 days. Now, people think Zoom calls, you can only do a couple hours. We were on for 9 to 10 hours a day. Yeah. 2 days in a row, back to back, all those people. And the feedback was really good. And I think we got more done than we would face-to-face. The outcomes were amazing. The team engagement was amazing. The energy was there all day, every day. Now, we engineered a lot of things into it to make it work. We did a lot of prep to make it work. We spent way more time preparing than we would ever for a face-to-face. Yeah. But it was insanely efficient. And we, rough math, if 2/3 of the people would normally travel, even half of the people would normally travel, plus the meeting room expenses, you're easily save 30,000 Canadian dollars. In the US, it'd probably still be US, but easily save $30,000 and a lot of time and blah, 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 blah. It's like, man, this is awesome. But is it? Is it as awesome as we think it is? Now, and I know not everyone can do those kinds of meetings. That's a lot of work, and mean, we're professionals for running meetings, which should be good, and it's hard for us. But is it truly efficient or effective, right? It's efficient today. Is it truly effective? And
all right, so
I
I'm
am
going to
not.
start. I'm going to start by saying on this subject that arguably the most successful management consultant of the 20th century was Peter Drucker. He was the one that really was a mentor to Jim Collins, and if he wasn't the top, he'd be in the top three. His most successful book was called The Effective Executive, and on page 1, he said that the job of a manager is to be efficient, and the job of a leader is to be effective. Now, a leader being, or an executive being someone who's in control of their own time. That's his differentiation. So I think you get the point. I think it's the way that you've described it is fascinating. So if we were,
does that mean good? Is that like good fascinating, or just is that your way, the Aussie way of saying you disagree?
No, definitely not. I think if we were 10 years into the future and the millennials who are internet natives were a lot more present in leadership teams than they already are, I wonder if this would be as much of a debate. Number one. Number two,
yes,
I want to throw in the concept of EQ, right? So if you've got a leader on a leadership team who hasn't got as high an EQ, I put it to you, there's a little bit of Darwinism kicking in here, right? Which is survival of the fittest. Because in my experience, and I ran a 8-hour session yesterday, via Zoom with leadership team in Sydney, running a lot like yourself via Zoom. In the personal arena, in a leadership team offsite workshop, if you've got a lower EQ than your peers, you might be able to get through. But in Zoom, it makes it that degree harder to get through. Now,
so are you saying EQ matters more now than normal in this digital?
In this environment, I think it does. If you're not aware of the people's emotions and sentiments around you, if you can't pick up on those personal cues in a personal, in an in-person sense, it's going to be even harder through video conferencing. And let's say that COVID went for 5 years, it's gonna hamper your career. It's going to stop you going to the next level because you can't perform at your best in this type of environment.
It's true, because it's interesting. Like, I was trained on, I can hear how people are feeling, and I can almost hear what people are thinking, and not getting all weirdo, but I've learned to hear different breaths, because I learned my job on conference calls. My training early on was conference calls. So I can hear, and when I can see people, I see changes in facial expressions, where people look. You got 24 people on a screen. I'm noticing what's going on with the different faces.
Yeah.
But it's natural for me because I've trained that way, and I sense things and feel things. So it's obvious, but some people might not.
But you've got 20 years as a facilitator, looking at people's expressions and being aware of that. And I've got 10 years. My point is, if you don't have a facilitator who's very conscious and picks up on the tiniest cues, they're definitely not going to do it in this arena. And if it's
which will dramatically impact the quality of the meeting, quality of discussions.
Yep.
It's a really interesting thought, Brad. And I could see it, because EQ is always important. I mean, EQ, as you go and become more of a senior leader, and if you don't have good EQ, you need a hell of a lot of power and something to stay in your position. And if it's an authoritarian style company, you can kind of get away with some of it. But in more of the modern, real culture-based companies, I was having a conversation today with an exec from one of the companies that I worked with. Amazing company, amazing CEO. The exec's gone somewhere else and was asking us to help him. And we were talking about the CEO, about how they knew how to set a vision, get people bought into it, let people do their thing, have autonomy, make decisions, and just in a massive, massive amount of EQ that CEO had in order to make that happen. He was more of a conductor of an orchestra than anything. And it's really interesting. Really interesting. Do you think, go ahead.
Well, you said $30,000 as a nominal sum for the workshop that you conducted in the past week or two.
Yeah, they saved, yeah.
Well, I don't discount the value of coming together, but there is a line in the sand that through everybody's interaction may have shifted a little bit, and couple that with more millennials, more internet natives on these types of calls where it's like, yeah, this is what we do all the time. Every time I speak to my friends.
To them, it's not a big deal. No, because for us, I grew up in an analog world. You know, I was in like grade 8, and we had our first DOS-based computer. So I've sort of been, where my kids, everything is automatic for them. You know, my son by nature connects it. Go ahead.
Sorry, you're looking at a meeting and you're saying, oh, this is a change for me. But many of the people are looking at it going, but this is how we do stuff. It's not a change for them. It's a change for you, but it's not a change for some of the people.
Yeah. Like my son, he connects with other people online for video games that he plays, and it's just normal. You know, my daughter got 1,500 Instagram followers, I think, for her dog. Her puppy's 3 months old and it's got almost 1,500 Instagram followers. But she didn't even think or try. It's just what she does. So yeah, I think you're right. I think 10 years forward, and by the way, if you look at it, hey, I got a great idea. Try this idea. Let's get 30 people together from our company. Let's all tell them to go on an airplane to come to a central city. And we're going to sit and talk for, 8 hours, but they're going to travel each for 2 days, and we're going to spend $1,500 per head plus the bar bill. Unless we need to get them revved up and they're salespeople. If you just think about it, we talked about the power of video conferencing in the past, a decade ago, and how air travel would slow down. It never did. But this could, it could be the time. But the question is though, like, are we missing? We have so many of our meetings, and again, we worked our butts off, and you and I have collaborated on it as well, to find a way to make really effective virtual meetings.
Oh yeah.
And we've got a very good system. Even normal meetings, we know how to run them, and we're always improving. But is there? So they are efficient, and they're effective in terms of what we're getting done and the results. But are we stealing some money from somewhere else, right? Are we drawing down on the relationship? Are we missing that opportunity to build a relationship? Even with the EQ, are we actually missing out? Is kind of my question. Like, will it start to show us some pains and cracks in the future?
Well, it's the same story in a leadership team meeting as it is in the standard work from home office. Really, it's like what's the cost? But then when we come back to the job of a leader is to be effective. How effective are we? Because it's not only the travel time, it's not only the cost, it's the drain of the travel. You and I travel a lot, and it's taxing. There's a hangover for a day or two when you come back from a longer trip, maybe more. But how? Really, the question as a leader. Let's go back to Elon Musk. Let's circle all the way back. The allocation of resources, right? How can we be most effective? At the allocation
and I know it's
of resources.
Easier and it's less draining and all of those things. And I know there's been some very powerful conversations over lunch, early morning. Some of the teams, someone will go work out together in the morning, or late night having a beverage or a dinner or a team building event. I think it can be done. We work with companies that are completely virtual in the past. Even going back 10 years, many companies. And I'm just wondering, and I even think about our work with the companies we work with, that face-to-face, there's some real powerful connections, and it's usually investments in the relationship or investments in an emotional bank account that I think about. And And I believe we can find other ways and we can pivot and do that.
Think about it like internet dating. 20 years ago or 15 years ago, whenever it first came out, it was only the people at the very fringe. And now it's kind of a little bit the norm, or it's the
But they still
majority
meet
of
each
people.
other, Brad. They still meet each other.
Yes, but in terms of the meet, in terms of when they first connected,
Yes.
15 years ago, there was this period in time before now when people would say, well, I would never go onto an internet dating site because only the weirdos go there, or I can't really get to know someone, or something like that. And then gradually society changed and they got to the point where we are now, where it's completely normal for someone to meet
It
someone
is,
on an
but
internet
they're
site.
not having virtual relationships. It's the initial getting to know each other, but we're not at the stage yet where you have a relation, or that I know of, where you have a relationship with somebody that you never meet, and you actually never meet up. Huh?
Tell me more about that. This could go quite an interesting way.
It could go in all kinds of wild and weird places, and we could be getting very much into sci-fi and sci-fi world. I can see courier packages going back and forth. I'm sure there's a way to fit. We can ask Elon Musk that one. I don't know, but I hear you, and it's interesting. We've got a call with an entrepreneur I know who has a team building company that has a whole segment of the products that are virtual team building. So, like, we're looking into that. How do we build the emotional bank account between the team members? And we're going to be looking at some virtual team building solutions, because it can't just be transactional business. We need the other side of the coin. And we're looking into how we can handle that part, knowing that getting together might not happen as much anymore.
The cost is in the commute and the time. I got one client that I know, and he did the sums. He's going to save 360 hours per year, which means that every 6 years, if he maintains this schedule, he will get a free year of productivity. And I think the increased productivity is really going to be playing on people's minds. The amount of time that people have gotten
it's
back
the
through this.
rationalizer. The key is it actually free? And I'm open to the fact that it could be, but I'm not convinced, because it's and I go back to the I don't, this is like a chicken and the egg argument, sort of. It's like you could argue either side, but it's like good friends. If you talk to them on the phone, but you never get together, the relationships, energetically, it's not the same.
I've got a client.
Maybe I'm stuck because I grew up in it. Go ahead.
I got a client started working with 2 months ago, literally a week before COVID really got bad.
Yep.
Never met them in person. They're on the east coast of Australia, on the west coast. I'm on the west coast. And we have never met in person. We've only interacted via Zoom and telephone. And we've got a trusted relationship, I would say, that is as good as any of the other clients that I've got within reason, notwithstanding time.
I've had many of those, Brad. I've got a client in Mexico City. I ended up meeting him once after about a year. But otherwise, I had a client in New York for a year. I had one client who worked in New York for like 3 years. To this day, I have not met them. And I've got many clients we've got, clients that have been in Italy and other parts of Europe and other places, Asia, that our team has worked with, never met them. And that works. I'm thinking of team dynamics so here, no matter what, it's our challenge to figure that out. The challenge is, how do we make that work, I guess, is
how can we be more effective?
Correct. We know we can have the efficiency. How to be more effective?
Yeah.
So it's about time for us to kind of wrap up to the interesting conversation. And I think that debate will continue. I know lots of people will experiment with it. I shared before, one of our clients, they're actually a few of our clients have had leases up for renewal, and they haven't renewed. One had had an office space downtown Vancouver. They're not renewing.
Yeah.
And they're thinking, hey, we're going to try this virtual for a while. Plus we'll save some cash. And if we need it, there'll probably be a fairly good supply to buy back into and or lease back into in the future.
That's going to be a hard decision.
Yes. But those are the types of decisions that you can change, right? They're not permanent.
Yeah.
So you can afford to do an experiment and then see what happens. So anyway, excellent thoughts. So
Good
thanks
job.
for listening. This has been the Growth Whispers podcast with Brad, and I'm Kevin. If you want the video, go to YouTube. Do you know we have the URL, Brad? I don't remember it off the top of my head.
The Growth Whisperers on YouTube.
Yeah, look up the Growth Whispers on YouTube.
Yeah.
Perfect. And to get Brad, you get evolutionpartners.com.au. And to get Kevin, lawrenceandco.com. And we're always happy to answer any additional questions. Or if you have questions you'd like us to cover off in the podcast, we're more than happy to do that.
Lovely.
So have an awesome week. We'll see you again, or hear you again, or you can hear us again next week.
See you go. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.